2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mayor Cyril Jefferson convening a special meeting of the High Point City Council. Here with me in the room, we have every member of council present, except for council members Johnson and Peters, but we expect to see them at some point later today. As we get into our meeting, we're going to go ahead and ask for adoption of our agenda. I will also note that in light of what time we've got some folks arriving today, we're actually going to switch our agenda around a little bit and do item 2025-106 first, and then move to item 2025-105. I want to just make sure that everyone knows that change and is fine with it. And if so, is there a motion to adopt our agenda with that change?
Motion to adopt with the change.
I'll second.
Motion
Change.
been made by Councilmember Holmes and seconded by Councilmember Andrew. Any discussion on the motion to adopt our agenda with those changes? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, and we have our agenda. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made by Mayor Pro Tem Moore, seconded by Councilmember Holmes. Any discussion on the motion to go into closed session? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, and we'll go into closed session.
And we are a marketing and research firm that specializes in conducting community surveys for city and county governments. And this past winter, for the 10th time, we conducted a resident survey for the city of High Point. So today I'm going to walk through the key findings from the survey. I have just a little background about ETC Institute. We're a national leader in providing market research for local governments. We've been doing this type of work for over 40 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've conducted surveys in more than 1,000 communities across the country. And that includes a lot of cities and counties throughout the state of North Carolina. So this is really the type of work that we specialize in. This is just an overview of what I'll go through today. I'll go over the purpose and methodology of the survey. I'll walk through the key findings, and then I'll summarize our main takeaways from the survey. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. So there's several reasons to conduct a survey like this. One is to get an objective assessment of how satisfied High Point residents are with major city services, and to determine what residents feel are the top priorities for the community. Most of the questions are the same this year as we've asked in previous years. That way we can measure trends over time. And then also we're able to compare your results with other communities across the country. So this survey was 7 pages in length. It's a pretty lengthy survey. On average, it takes residents 15 to 20 minutes to complete. So I mentioned this is the 10th resident survey we conducted for the city of High Point. The most recent one was in 2022, and the first one was way back in 2007. So almost 20 years now we've been conducting these surveys. The survey was administered by a combination of mail and online to randomly selected households throughout the city. And we received a total of 420 completed surveys. Our goal was to get to 400, so we had a good response. We accomplished that. And the results of the 420 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error of plus or minus 4.8%. Essentially, that means that if we conducted this survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 4.8% from what we're reporting. So even for a statistically valid survey like this, the results are not perfect, but the margin of error is small. Here we have a map of the city. The red dots are households that completed the survey. So we had a good distribution throughout the city. And as we were administering the survey, we made sure that the demographics of survey respondents reflect the actual population of the city, especially for key demographic areas such as age, race, ethnicity, and gender. So here's what we learned from the survey. We found that the city is moving in the right direction. Satisfaction ratings have either increased or stayed the same in 75 out of 107 areas since your last survey in 2022. And that goes against the trend of what we've been seeing across the country. In most states that we've surveyed, the satisfaction ratings have gone down overall over the past couple of years. So this is definitely a good thing. We compared your results to other communities. One area that stood out is High Point rates 21 percentage points above the U.S. average when it comes to the overall quality of city services. And this is one of the most important questions on the survey, because here we're asking residents to take into account all the services that you're providing and really give an overall satisfaction rating for how well you're doing. And then one of the areas on the survey where you rated the farthest above the U.S. average is customer service provided by city employees, where High Point rated at 39 percentage points above the U.S. average. And we'll look at this in more detail in a little bit. And the top overall priorities are city streets, sidewalks, infrastructure, economic development, police services, enforcing codes and ordinances, and communication with the public. So first we'll look at some general perceptions that residents have of the city. Here we ask residents to rate their perceptions of High Point in a number of different ways. You can see the dark blue are ratings of excellent, the light blue is good, the gray is neutral, and we interpret neutral as average or meeting expectations. It's a rating of a 3 on a 5-point scale, so it's not a bad rating. And then the pink and red are ratings of below average or poor. So overall, you can see that the positive ratings far outweigh the negative. If you look at the top of this chart, 70% of respondents gave positive ratings to the overall quality of city services, compared to only 10% who gave negative ratings. So you've got about a 7-to-1 ratio of those who gave positive versus negative ratings to the overall quality of city services, which is a very good rating. Typically that ratio is more in the lines of 4 or 5 to 1, as opposed to 7 to 1.
Wish we could have took this after the announcement of a weekly, pickup. Going back to weekly pickup.
Yeah, well, maybe next time. So this was the very first question on the survey. Here we asked residents how satisfied they are with major categories of city services. So here we're asking residents to rate these areas at the big picture departmental level. And then later on in the survey, we ask about some more specific areas within some of these categories. So again, the blue are the positive ratings, that's very satisfied and satisfied. The gray is neutral or average. And then the pink and red are those who are dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. So overall, again, the positive ratings far outweigh the negative. If you look at the top of this chart, the highest rated areas are fire department, library, parks, recreation, electrical utility services, customer service provided by city employees, and police services. For all those areas, well more than, at least 70%, in some cases much more than that, of residents are satisfied, and less than 10% are dissatisfied. The lowest rated area was streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure. But even for that, you had about an equal number of positive to negative responses. A lot of times when we ask this question, there'll be 2 or 3 items that have significantly more negative than positive responses. And then we ask respondents to rate their interactions with city employees. So these results are based on those respondents who have contacted the city in the past year, which was a little over 50% of survey respondents. You can see that residents have had very, very positive interactions with city employees. Most respondents gave high ratings to employees being courteous and polite. Most feel that employees gave prompt, accurate, and complete answers to questions. There were also high ratings to residents doing what they said they would do in a timely manner, helping residents resolve their issue to their satisfaction. Respondents feel that services were provided at a time that was accommodating to their schedule. And then the majority of respondents felt that it was easy to contact the person they were trying to get in touch with. So we also found that residents in all areas of the city are satisfied with the overall quality of city services. Here again, we have that map of the city. And what we did here is we broke the results out by census block group, which are the boundaries, those dark black lines show the boundaries. So this tells us if residents in different parts of the city have different perceptions of the city or rate services differently. You can see the entire map is blue, and there's actually one area in dark blue, which is the highest possible rating. So this tells us that residents in all parts of the city are satisfied with the overall quality of city services. Sometimes what happens is, even if the results are very positive overall, once you break it into these smaller geographic areas, you might find some areas where residents are more dissatisfied or don't feel like they're getting as good of service as people in other parts of the city. But this shows you're doing a great job providing services equally throughout the city.
Do you mind telling us where that dark blue census tract is at?
That's Michael.
Oh, yeah.
It looks
That's
like
due to
it
Mike,
is.
it is.
Yeah.
Over there, across from Oak Lake,
Yeah.
above.
Bit of.
We're happy in Ward 6.
Good job, Michael.
Yeah, we're not gonna spend any more money there.
Maybe that's the downside, right?
That's 311 bordering it right there?
Yeah, it is.
So some of that's Ward 1, Michael.
Yeah,
It's a
the
little-
little pieces.
Just to, I thought you know that. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, there you're good. Yeah, I mean, the results are excellent citywide, but that one area, yeah, especially, the results
Mike,
are
you should put on your
especially.
campaign poster.
Dude, it's already done.
Congratulations, Councilman Holmes.
Okay, I mentioned earlier that the city's moving in the right direction. Compared to the last survey in 2022, 58 out of 107 areas have had an increase in satisfaction. In 17 areas, the ratings have been the same. And then in 32 areas, there's been a decrease in satisfaction compared to 2022. And this definitely goes against the trend of what we've been seeing across the country over the last year or two. In most cases, it's kind of the reverse of this, more decreases than increases in satisfaction. So for these next few charts, the dark blue line are the satisfaction ratings for this year's survey. The green bar are the satisfaction ratings for the most recent survey in 2022. And then that orangish bar are the results for 2020. So this is for major categories of city services. You can see in most areas the ratings are pretty similar to previous years. If you look at the second row down, quality of library services, there's been a pretty big increase in satisfaction this year compared to 2020, from 77% satisfaction in 2020 up to 85% this year. If you go down a couple rows, fourth row down, city electrical utility services, there's been a significant increase in each of the past couple of surveys there, from 68% 4 years ago to 79% now. And then the one area that has gone down the last couple of surveys is trash, recycling, and yard waste, which has gone from 79% satisfaction 4 years ago to 71% now.
I was gonna say, a lot of that is survey time. And
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then, you know, these results really are a snapshot in time. I mean, that happens sometimes where there's some particular thing going on at that time.
It's interesting to see the police line for 2020 and see what the police line is now. 2020, I would have thought would have been a flashpoint, just around the country for police. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. Yeah, I mean, the police results have been obviously very consistent over the last several years. Same with all public safety, fire department, same thing, almost exactly the same the last few years. This is a continuation of the question of major categories of city services. A lot of these results have been very similar to the last couple of years. If you look at the third row down, stormwater management system's gone up a little bit each of the past couple of years. You look at the bottom, maintenance of street, sidewalks, and infrastructure, that's gone down a little bit each of the last few years. These are comparisons for perceptions of safety. Yeah, you can see the ratings have remained consistently high for how safe residents feel in their neighborhood during the day as well as at night. There's been a big increase in how safe residents feel just overall in the city of High Point from 2020 to now. In 2020, 49% of respondents said they felt safe overall in the city. It's 10 percentage points higher now in 2024. And there's also been a pretty big increase over the last several years in how safe residents feel in retail shopping areas of the city, in parks and greenways, and in the core city area around Main Street. And then these are comparisons for the overall perception of the city. If you look at that top row, overall quality of city services, that's a question that earlier I mentioned is one of the most important questions on the survey, because there we're asking residents to take into account all of the services that the city's providing. You can see satisfaction's increased each of the past couple surveys. It's gone from 65% satisfaction 4 years ago to 70% today. There's also been a pretty steady increase in satisfaction to the overall quality of life in the city, from 56% 4 years ago to 65% today.
I'm sorry, could you go back one?
Sure.
Appearance of the city. Can you give me a little bit of insight into, what potentially that means when someone's asking about the appearance of the city? Is it the perception of the city? Is it how the city looks? It's the design of the city? Is it?
I imagine some of that's code compliance too, right?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that as an indicator earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think is code compliance, how the city looks more so. Because there is a separate line for image of the city, which is that fourth row down. So I interpret that as, how the city looks, code enforcement, code ordinances, those things.
I'm not sure if it makes a difference, but I was one of the people who answered the survey, and it was the overall appearance, the trash, things like that.
Okay.
Did you skew
I
Ward
was gonna
5
say
rating?
that's what I'm trying to Can we trust this data?
It wasn't ward specific, so.
So So we also compared your results to other communities. We found that satisfaction with major city services overall is higher in High Point than other communities. So for these next couple charts, the dark blue line are High Point residents who are either very satisfied or satisfied. The light blue are the satisfaction ratings in the Atlantic region. So that includes the state of North Carolina as well as surrounding states. And then the orange bar are the satisfaction ratings from residents from all across the country. Now, this is based on a national survey that ETC Institute conducts about every 1 to 2 years with about 10,000 randomly selected residents from all across the country. So this is for major categories of city services. I put blue arrows by the places where High Point rates significantly higher than the regional and US average, which you can see is the case for all 7 of these areas. The area where you rate the farthest above the national average is customer service with city employees, which is the 4th row down. You have a 78% satisfaction rating. You can see that's double the national average at 39%, a little over double the regional average. But you're also significantly above the regional and national average when it comes to fire department, library, parks and recreation, police services, trash recycling and yard waste, which we saw the results are down, but you can see the results are much higher than other communities. And then city water and utilities, water and sewer utilities also rates much higher than other communities. And this is a continuation of the question about major categories of city services. You can see your ratings are much higher when it comes to the appearance of facilities, overall quality of city services, which again, that's a really important question on the survey, traffic flow, and then enforcing codes and ordinances. Stormwater management, communication, street sidewalks, and infrastructure. Those ratings aren't bad, but they're just more on par with other communities. So now we'll take a look at top priorities. We saw earlier how satisfied residents are with major categories of city services. As a follow-up question, we asked which of these services should receive the most emphasis from city leaders over the next 2 years. And respondents could pick up to 3 choices from this list. So you can see the top choice by a pretty wide margin is streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure. The next highest top priorities are economic development, police services, traffic flow, codes and ordinances, and communication with the public. This is something that we call the important satisfaction rating, and this is a tool that we use to help communities set priorities. This analysis is based on 2 types of data, both which we've seen already. First, we ask residents how satisfied they are with services. Then we ask which services are the most important for the city to emphasize. So the idea behind this is that those services that have a combination of low satisfaction ratings, but at the same time are rated as the most important, are the areas we recommend as the highest priorities to focus on. And we think it's important to factor in both satisfaction and importance, because you could have an area that has low satisfaction, but that doesn't necessarily mean that residents think it's important to invest money in those areas. So as we go through these next 2 charts, the areas in pink are the highest priority, yellow is the next highest priority. Areas in green are more of a medium level priority. Now this doesn't mean that the areas in green don't need any attention, but making improvements to areas in pink and yellow would impact the greatest number of residents. So this first chart is for major categories of city services. You can see by a pretty wide margin, the top priority is city streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure. The next highest priorities are economic development, codes and ordinances, communication with the public, and traffic flow. This table focuses specifically on transportation and roadway services. You can see the top priority is the condition and maintenance of major city streets. The next tier priority includes the availability of walkways and sidewalks, the availability of public transportation services, maintenance of sidewalks, the availability of elderly and handicapped van service, and then traffic signal coordination on major city streets. This table focuses on neighborhood services. You can see the top priorities are the availability of affordable rental housing, enforcing the cleanup of junk cars and debris on private property, the availability of affordable housing for purchase. And affordable housing has been a very high priority nationwide, especially over the past couple of years. So not a surprise to see those at the top of the list. The other top priorities are the enforcing the removal of dilapidated housing and enforcing the repair of substandard housing. And then this chart focuses on public safety services. You can see the top priorities are reducing neighborhood street-level drugs and other crimes, visibility of police in neighborhoods, and then ensuring the community is prepared for natural disasters. The next highest priorities are enforcing traffic laws and visibility of police in retail areas. And then here we ask respondents, to rate the importance of the various reasons when deciding where to live. You can see the areas residents feel are the most important when deciding where to live are having a feeling of safety and security, the quality of housing, quality of healthcare, access to quality shopping, and types of housing. So just a quick recap, we saw that things are moving in the right direction. Satisfaction ratings have either increased or stayed the same in 75 out of 107 areas over the past couple of years. It's actually the second survey in a row where there's been a big overall increase in satisfaction compared to the previous survey. When we compare your results to other communities, one of the areas where you rate that really stands out is you rate 21 percentage points above the U.S. average when it comes to the overall quality of city services.
Got a question on that.
Sure.
The folks you're comparing to a similar communities, how do you define that? By population, geography, what?
These comparisons were in two ways. One was nationwide, so just all across the country, regardless of size of the community. And then that Atlantic region was a regional comparison. So state of North Carolina as well as surrounding states. Now there's other ways we could do those comparisons as well. We could compare to similar sized cities if you wanted to do that to see what the differences are. But these numbers here I'm showing are based on the entire US. So. And then one of the areas where you rated the farthest above the US average is customer service provided by city employees. We saw that was really high overall, but then we also saw it was high in those specific aspects we asked about. And then the top overall priorities, streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure, economic development, police services, enforcing codes and ordinances, and communication with the public. So that's everything that I had. Overall, definitely very, very positive results once again. So with that, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so on that one map that you showed us, and it was all light blue and then that dark blue area. And then it also says 75 out of 107 are the same or higher. So that puts 32 at below. Do we have any type of data shown on a map? Number one, where all the surveys were sent, how many of the 420 were sent, where responded and where? And then maybe where some of the lowest, okay, did I miss it? Oh, the first one, okay.
Yeah, right, this, sorry, pull it back.
Okay.
Yeah, so this map,
All right.
the red dots are the location of households that completed a survey. Now, these are geocoded to the block level. We don't show the exact address just to protect resident confidentiality, but this gives you a very good idea of where the responses came from.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and then the other question, this map, so I just showed this map about the overall quality of city services, but we create a map like this for every question on the survey asked on a 5-point scale. So there are about 100 maps like this, I think maybe even a little bit more, that show the results broken out citywide. And then you can see which areas had, how satisfied they are with different services.
So that color, that,
It's like 300 pages long, so it's got a lot of stuff.
oh, okay.
Yes, right, it's a
Okay.
lot.
Okay,
It's very-
Okay, I was just curious where the below average places would be, but,
They call that Michael's map.
okay, okay.
Well, it seems like there's good alignment with our strategic
Yeah,
plan and the
absolutely.
priorities of the citizens of
Yeah,
Monroe.
yeah.
So we must be listening to our constituents pretty well.
And I'd love to see the communication with the public piece 2 years from now,
Yeah.
because there's such a big focus on that.
Yeah, with TEC.
Yeah, and then the new dashboard and
Mhm.
several other tools that we're rolling out. I think that's gonna move the needle greatly in the next few years.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Have you ever done a study like like the cities that are the highest rated, I mean, to sort of find out how they make the magic work, that makes them so different than the cities that are not doing so well. I mean, some best practices that we might could learn here.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. We, we don't really get too much into that. We kind of conduct a survey and then we're out of the picture. But I do know sometimes the higher performing cities do ask what some of the other higher performing cities were and then contact them and to kind of get some of that feedback. So I can send you a list of some of the higher performing cities if you wanted them.
So it sounds like people will be contacting us to find out what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what this shows is, first, it's a major appreciation to Manager Ford and our entire staff. The job that's done by staff all around this enterprise is incredibly impressive. And as council members, much like the metaphor of airplanes, you only really hear about airplanes when they go down. As council members, we rarely get a call when someone likes something, right? Most times we're getting calls when something supposedly isn't going right. And somehow this helps reset perspective, at least for me it does. I wish I constantly could have this in my mind so that way we're aware that we are getting things right. And yes, we can continue to grow. That's what government is for a lot of people to keep working on those areas. But to be very clear that we are doing a fantastic job. We've got almost 1,500 employees who care about their jobs in a way, where you see that service. I mean, I wrote down what you said. We rate 21% above US average in quality of city services. But as you said, we doubled the national average, so 39 points in terms of customer service provided by city employees. And in a day and age where there's all types of depictions of what government employees do and say and all that, it's great to be reminded that you have a lot of civil servants who are trying their absolute best and hardest to show up every day to not only provide a great service, but do it with a smile. And that's very impressive, and that has a lot to do with the culture that I think is set by this organization. So that's a leadership piece, so we appreciate the leadership team setting such a great culture here of high performance and high sort of engagement and courtesy and stuff with folks. I do have a question, if I can dig in here just a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
You mentioned there's some things you're never gonna get 100% right. I imagine if you had a survey asking people, do you have enough speed bumps on your street? Everywhere in the country, everyone's gonna say, we need more speed bumps. Because no matter where I go, people talk about that. I just have to somehow feel like it's similar for the sidewalk, streets, and infrastructure somehow.
Right.
Not saying we shouldn't work on it, obviously, I've talked about it, I think at length. I think we need to be a more walkable city, and there's other things I think about. But do you see in your surveys around the country that people in general, because one of the points you put down in terms of what's most important is the availability of sidewalks. I imagine all around the country, people want sidewalks in their neighborhoods, and maybe they feel like they just don't have enough. Does that show up pretty consistently?
It does, yeah. Streets, sidewalks, infrastructure, that is pretty much always either the first or second highest priority in just about any city. So that's very, very typical. And it's one of your lower rated areas, but when you compare it to other communities, you can see it's the bottom row here. You are a little bit below the regional average and a little below the national average, but not by much. It's pretty similar. So it's always one of the lower rated areas, always one of the highest priorities. So there's nothing, I mean, that's definitely very typical.
Mayor, one other question that came to mind from a staff perspective when we were looking at some of these is a lot of times I don't think it's very clear to differentiate between roads that are maintained by the city and some that are state maintained facilities that really need to be kind of repaved. There may be infrastructure underneath, rail lines that run under Main Street that creates those crowns in the road and the potholes and things like that. So for residents to understand which roads are completely the responsibility of the city to maintain that infrastructure versus others that we may have to partner on. I think it's harder to explain that nuance, and that may also be reflected in some of those lower scores that you see as it relates to the maintenance of our city streets. So I think that's that's something that we try to understand and unpack a little bit more, and I don't know if we have a good, solid answer for that portion.
Yeah, the two pieces that went with streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure, I wrote them down, were conditional streets and conditional maintenance, but it was also availability of sidewalks.
Sidewalks is a big one.
Which I know at some point we've been wanting to have a more robust and intentional discussion about sidewalks. I'd be curious about who's getting sidewalks right around the country and isn't breaking the bank at the same time. And going into debt, because sidewalks are so freaking expensive, forgive me, they're very expensive. And you're just thinking about ROI on it, and not everything's about ROI, I know that. But sidewalks are very, very expensive. So I'd be curious, who's getting the sidewalk thing right? And how are they doing it in a way that doesn't make cost of living so inabsorbable?
Yeah, I can definitely look into that and find some of the higher rated cities when it comes to sidewalks. I mean, it is typically one of the higher priorities in lower rated areas, like that's not unique to High Point. But I can definitely find out some of the cities that have higher ratings when it comes to sidewalks.
I think staff would welcome that conversation as well, and I think a part of that question too is understanding if cities are going back in and putting in sidewalks as part of a unique program, or whether their sidewalks are being installed in neighborhoods as part of their development process. There are two different ways to make those things happen.
And I imagine, sorry, everywhere you squeeze a balloon, it expands, because the conversation about making developers put in sidewalks is a whole nother survey where developers are rating your city based on if they like developing in your city or not. So that's another piece. I think it's important for this group to know, but also for the public to know, that we have to balance these conversations where we certainly want to invest in more sidewalks around the city. We also want our partners who are privately developing to do it, but we also know that when you're trying to develop a project, housing is already as expensive as it is, and when you do sidewalks, it makes the housing project that much more expensive. So that gets pushed onto the customer, and we just saw the resident survey and talk about what's important, and housing affordability is important too. So it's you squeeze one side of the balloon and it expands, right? There's no way to get around it, and how we balance these things is important. That said, we still have to continue to have this conversation, I think, about availability of sidewalks and where we can be intentional to support that. Because I do think sidewalks at the very least impacts accessibility. And I know in many places we try to make sure that our populations who need to walk places, who may not have their own transit, can have sidewalks. And so at the very least, as long as we ensure that we're thinking about accessibility, what's equitable sort of in that way, I think can be really, really important. So, any other thoughts here? Questions?
No, but one thing that does come to mind is that, when we were at NLC in Tampa, I had a conversation with a representative from Colorado who said they don't have land restriction really. They have plenty of land to develop on. They struggle with the availability of water. Whereas, we have an older city. And so some of these newer places are able to build with better information than when our city originally started kind of growing and spreading. And so also keeping in mind how we take that into account, the historic nature when we are developing or redeveloping and paving over things that used to be, or changing the landscape of what used to be. It's something that we have to be mindful of, that somebody who's building something brand new may not have to think about, or may not be thinking about the same way.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm also very curious about Mayor Pro Tem Moore's point about who we're comparing it to. I know you said it's all over the country, it's different folks. My brain was parsing through the fact that some municipalities don't have the luxury of paying for this kind of survey to be done year to year. Or maybe they're just not prone to do these kinds of things. So I'm wondering if that skews the data to those who have a certain population size and certain resources to invest in this kind of survey. And so does that mean we're being compared to those folks only? So I am curious about that too, but I think whatever you end up getting back to us on that, I think would be really helpful. And I'm looking forward, like Councilman Peters, to jump into this 300 pages of information so we can look at it more closely.
308.
Councilmember Andrew, have you already done it?
He's already done a deep dive.
He's already done the
Forward to
deep
his
dive.
next-
I'll just ask him.
Any other questions, comments, anything from staff on this? Can you tell us, Manager Ford, how we're utilizing this to, I guess, prioritize the strategic plan implementation, or how this goes into that in any way?
Clearly, we have our goals for the strategic plan that were done prior to the results coming out. But when we look at those particular performance measures that we're tracking under each category, we refer back to the resident survey. And also, as we're putting our budgets together, and we look at things that we're prioritizing, clearly, we're prioritizing the things that are included in the resident survey as well when we're bringing those ideas to you. So if there are new ideas that are being considered, we'll try to look and see how it's balanced to what our residents said was important to them. And those are the things that we bring back to you all as priorities. So you'll see it as part of those performance measures that we track under those broad goals, the 6 broad goals that we have. And you'll also see it prioritized in terms of budget priorities that are coming back to you all for consideration.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to us aligning, as you said, this data with the strategic plan, prioritizing it in that way. Appreciate, Meredith, everything that you're doing, obviously, engaging the survey, the strategic plan and all that. I think it's fantastic. Carl, I know you've been busy with that too, so I appreciate y'all. Anything else on this item? Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Is it Mr. Morado?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
You got it.
It's okay, I got to follow after you. That's it.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, and appreciate you flying in. Hope you have a safe flight going back.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn the special meeting? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Moore, seconded by Councilmember Andrew. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn a special meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, we are adjourned. Excellent.
Are you like going right back to the airport now, or do you have more things to do?
No, I don't normally I like go somewhere I can stare back home, but I actually have a presentation tomorrow, tomorrow morning. Hopefully